Welcome, everyone, to today's monthly Feed Your Mind series. Today's topic, Back to Basics, Tuning into Your Channel. I'm Wendy Singer, and on behalf of our board of directors, staff, volunteers, we welcome you to today's program. No Shame on You is dedicated to eliminating the stigma associated with mental health conditions so the people who need the help will seek it, family members and friends will know how to provide proper support and to save lives. We achieve our mission through all kinds of different programming, including our virtual program like we have today, public programs, workshops, trainings, weekly blogs, podcasts, creation of mental health resources, videos, and more. We have over 120,000 social media followers, so please follow us for updated information and resources. We partner with organizations throughout the Chicagoland community and the country, and we're known for our inclusive, consistent, and responsive programming for people of all ages and backgrounds. And today, I want to introduce a really wonderful person. Her name is Bracha Jakofsky. She has her MSW and is the Abuse Prevention Coordinator and Mental Health Educator at JCFS Chicago. She educates and implements abuse prevention and monthly mental health curriculums to the community. She previously had held the role of employment specialist at JCFS for over 3 years, where she helped develop and maintain employment for people with disabilities. Bracha has previously held positions at Thresholds and Alternatives Inc., where she provided community mental health services and implemented educational programming. Bracha has her master's in social work from UIC and utilizes her experience in the mental health field to educate, expand, collaborate, and support services in the Community Services Department of JCFS. Bracha, we're so grateful for you being here and the continued partnership with JCFS Chicago. And welcome. Take it away.
Proactive work. And uh, I would like to be able to have some of you engage in some of this work together with me. And one of our goals today is we're going to be talking about how to plan proactively because we really want to be able to handle life's curveballs and navigate life's challenges in the best way that we can. So we're going to be talking about a basic pH model, which I will be going over in a bit. And we're going to be using some of these coping techniques and these strategies, also known as, to be able to reflect on some small steps to proactively enhance and promote your well-being for yourself, for your family, and for your community. If you have any
Bracha,
questions, please feel
yeah,
free.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that because I forgot that in the beginning. If you have any questions, please submit them in the chat to me. This session is going to build on different concepts, so we're going to wait to the end in case we answer some questions during the presentation. But go ahead and submit them in the chat, and we will show them at the end. Thanks, Bracha.
All right. So I'm going to start with this quote. I really like this quote, and I cannot pronounce his name for the life of me, but I'm going to read it out loud. There will always be rocks in the road ahead of us. They will be stumbling blocks or stepping stones. It all depends on how you use them. So, in these tough times, we may find ourselves trying to look for ways to seek and find ways to balance all our feelings of uncertainty, anxiety, trauma, loss, and trying to balance that with feelings of hopefulness and general hope for the better year to come. And we really do have the capacity to be able to overcome these challenges in a meaningful way. So we're going to look at ways that we naturally engage and use parts of ourselves to be able to overcome some things that may be challenging. We are going to be talking a little bit about coping strategies, but I don't like to use the word strategies so much as I like to use our ability to be resilient. And the way that I talk about resiliency in this way is that it's really a way to use and improve our mental well being and cope with the difficult or stressful situations in a way that we can interpret life's events in a more positive manner. It doesn't mean that we don't see challenges along the way. It doesn't mean that life is not stressful, but we want to be able to hold those feelings and move forward in that way. And that's a process that we can work on daily. And so we think about being proactive with our mental health and well being. And so I'm going to ask the question to you if anyone wants to put in their chat. Why do you feel it's important to identify some of our coping strengths before challenges may arise? Just a thought there. I'll give you all about 30 seconds if anyone wants to put anything in the chat, if they feel that that's something that they want to answer. Wendy, you are muted.
Okay, so somebody messaged me directly and said, we can, so the challenge is a little bit less to reduce the stress during the challenge. And someone else wrote, it's hard to think straight during challenges. Your mind gets scattered, and I certainly get disheveled
Yes,
during stressful
absolutely.
times.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like talking about being proactive because I think it's normal, right? In a situation that's really stressful, even just regular challenges, regular things. You wake up in the morning and you realize, oh my goodness, I'm late. I just ran out of coffee, or I stained my shirt, and on top of it there's you're trying to get out the door, and then there's traffic. You get to the office and there's a ton of emails that you're trying to deal with, right? Or you get a lot of phone calls, your kid's school calls and says, hey, you need to come pick up your kid. Any of these little things, right? We can keep on adding to the story, but we've all experienced just regular daily stressors and challenges. And then on top of it, thinking about these are like the quote unquote normal things that we're experiencing on a day to day. And then some of the larger challenges can increase our regular stress and mental well being. And so it's really important to think about, obviously, there's all these things that can feed into our day on a regular basis. And then there's the news of war, there's illness in families, there's strained relationships, there's financial hardships, there's so many things that everyone's dealing with, that these external factors can obviously impact some of our regular way in which we cope and handle life's challenges. And so I really want to be talking about how we can be proactive with that. Um, so this is actually a really helpful tool that I like to use because I think that it shows, and we're going to actually come back to this a little bit later, so it will make a little more sense. But I want us to kind of keep this in mind before we talk about the basic pH and the model. Um, Holding this is really hard, to hold the stressors and be able to have our coping in place. Sometimes when we're stressed, we are feeling that feeling of off balance, right? And it's hard because sometimes those stressors are piling up more than our ability to cope with those. And so we want to be able to bring our best selves into our work, into our community, into our family, and make those best decisions. And so we need to consider what our ability is and what our capacity is to be able to cope in that moment, whether it's whatever you want to fill in there. And we'll talk about some ideas of what we can put in there for later, because everyone's going to have their own. And so we really are going to be asking, what is it that we need to be able to deal with that stressor in that moment? Or what is it that we can work on now so that we can put into place so we already know and we can kind of balance that out? So when we talk about basic pH is a model for coping and resiliency that was actually developed by an Israeli professor, and he's a researcher, he's a trauma specialist. He's well known in the Israeli community, Dr. Muli Lahad. So I cannot take credit for this model at all. That would be pretty cool if I could. And his coping and resiliency model states that those people that are resilient are those that are found to use these 6 different coping styles or strategies, which he calls channels. So we might be using some of those words interchangeably today. As we go through some of these, we are going to be thinking about what might resonate with you. You may feel that more than one resonates, and that's okay. You're also going to see that some of them may feed into each other or work together with each other, and that's very common as well. I'm going to try to differentiate between the differences. I'm going to go through them one by one, and then I'm going to give some practical examples in which we can see these interacting on a day-to-day basis. So let's start with B. B is for belief. So when we talk about belief, um, again, everyone's gonna have a favorite familiar in one of these channels, and you'll see some of these resonate more with you than others. And the goal is to, when we're going through these, to identify this, and then we can obviously use other ones that we maybe are not tapping into regularly to find ways in which we can use some of these channels that are and find that they're even more helpful for us. And so it's important to have more than one go-to and find that there's more than one channel that works for you, because obviously life's challenges happen and you might find that one is really not working in that moment or that time. And I will give you some examples of that. But in general, you might have different ones that work in different places. And so we're going to think about what you're currently using and which ones you would like to grow in. These are natural ways in which we interact with the world. It's not just when something's going wrong, but also just our way and our outlook. So for belief, we're talking a lot about our belief system and our values. So examples of this may be tapping into certain beliefs that counter negative thoughts and emotions. So it might be someone who's saying, I'm going to be okay, I'm going to be fine. You may be having like a mantra that they say to themselves, or maybe they're drawing on certain strengths and saying, yeah, I have this strength about me. I'm really good at this. I'm really good at that. So I can get through this. I can do this. Some of these belief systems that people have might include some of the reflection that they have on their purpose in life. And maybe they're believing that they're there for a purpose, they're doing this thing, or maybe they're saying, this is really sucks and this is horrible, but there's a reason for it. Or I'm following this specific value of mine in this certain instance. And so I'm going to continue holding on to that value of mine. So sometimes a person also might be sharing some other thoughts or emotions while thinking about these beliefs. Maybe that's a value of theirs. They might also find that mindfulness or praying is a way in which that they use the channel belief. So when thinking about belief, what are things that you need to strengthen yourself? What are things that you need in order to be able to strengthen your belief in yourself and others? So just thinking about that. So the next letter is A for affect. Affect is, I think affect is the easiest one to maybe understand, because it kind of, the idea of expressing emotions kind of does weave in itself through all of these channels, but the way in which it's expressed is very different. So if a person is finding that they want to express their emotions, and not necessarily is it only that they want to connect with other people, they may be just, it's the reason that they are trying to express their feelings and emotions is because that's what makes them feel better. So it might not be that they have to talk to other people about the feelings that they're having. It might not be the beliefs that they're, talking about. It's that they want to express it. They want to get it out. So this person is maybe these type of people are really emotional. They like to share their feelings in different ways. So maybe they even listen to music as a way to express their emotions or feelings. Maybe they're drawing, maybe they're writing. They could also be journaling or even just laughing or crying just to get out the emotion, even if it's not to somebody. Um, Sharing the feeling, obviously, with a trusted person is the main thing that maybe people are doing to express their emotions, but there could be many other ways. For example, this person is literally painting. So, I mean, that could be a way in which people are using affect. I think that when it comes to affect, it's really important to think about are the ways that you're currently expressing your emotions and feelings a healthy way for you, right? And are there any activities that may help you feel recharged, or there may be activities that you're doing that are making you feel depleted? So thinking about that when it comes to affect is a really good thing to reflect upon. Next, we're going to go to S, stands for social. So social is pretty self-explanatory, but turning to other people for support and help. Now, you may ask, well, there's a lot of people that are going to express their emotions like they did in affect, right, for social. But the primary difference between affect and social is that if the person is turning to other people, because they want to connect, not just to share the emotion, that would be the person who's that social butterfly, who's trying to connect to other people as a means for socialization and for community, not just for sharing that emotion. So someone might be getting a lot of energy by spending time with other people. Maybe they really want to stay connected. I love this picture because it reminds us that we can stay connected even virtually, right? And even participating in any kind of social activity, even a webinar today, you're trying to find a way to connect with other people. I even have the opportunity to give to other people too. Some people want that socialization and have that opportunity to give. If somebody's spending a lot of time getting and keeping in touch with family and friends, that's a big one for people who are social. Also, maybe they're organizing an opportunity for meetup for friends. It doesn't necessarily have to be for like a social activity. Maybe it's just to get together. It doesn't mean they're going out and doing something as a whole group. And maybe they're using social media or online platforms to connect with other people too. So if you are a social person and you see yourself as identifying as this channel, consider what you can do to nurture some of the relationships in your life and what are some positive ways in which you can connect with people in a positive way. Okay, I is for imagination. So imagination really talks about the creativity that is being utilized. So examples, which again, you may be asking why we're using imagination, is what's different between affect and imagination. And there, again, could be a lot of overlap here, but imagination is really focusing on people are using some of the creativity and they're using their thought process to really be able to take themselves out of a situation and maybe imagine a better situation, or visualizing, something they want to do for enjoyment. These are the kinds of people that are, they might be daydreaming and thinking, okay, when I get home, I'm going to be laying on that couch, or, I can't wait for that vacation I'm going to be taking. When they're really stressed out, they take themselves out of that moment, and that's how they engage. Maybe this is somebody who likes to read fantasies or just reading a book at all. Maybe watching a movie. They just want to be able to take themselves out of reality and just think and relax. This is a type of person who also might be using humor in a way to be able to, because they're creative. There also might be all those type of creative activities, including drawing and painting and writing and making and playing music, all those kinds of activities, which we generally think of when we think of creativity. So like a lot of this, I like to think of is for the difference between imagination and the next one, which we're going to be going into, which is cognitive, thinking about what are ways in which we are engaging with the world and what are ways in which we are imagining a situation. Are we the type of person that takes a recipe and likes to follow it step by step? Or are we imagining all kinds of things in which we could create and saying, out with that cookbook, it's too stressful for me. I just want to take whatever ingredients I have and cook something up. And that could be enjoyable for one person. And for another person, we're going to go on to cognitive. Oops, sorry. For the cognitive person, they're much more logical and fact based. So they're following step by step by step. And so when it comes to engaging with a recipe, it's much more helpful for them to follow a recipe step by step because they're the kind of person that needs that structure. The person that's cognitive is also going to be that person that is probably trying to understand. They're trying to problem solve. So they're already they might be thinking positively. They might be using their intellect and trying to reframe. They might be setting those work goals, right? Looking for strategies or ways in which we could resolve an issue. They might be that person who's already running and figuring out how to problem solve that issue before you even processed it. They're the kind of person who's also probably breaking down the problem and trying to process and trying to figure it out, the intricacies. They also are the type of people who probably are using information to help them understand, to know the facts. So, especially nowadays, people are trying to get news and information, but a lot of these kinds of people are looking to get updated so they have reliable sources of information so they can make sense of what's happening, right? Um, so if cognitive strategies are the type of thing that works for you, think about what mentally stimulates you and keeps you healthy. And that can look different for every single person. And the last channel is the pH, which is physiological. So that's taking care of one's body. And it doesn't mean just exercise. It could mean anything that a person is normally engaging in order to take care of their body. So it could even include sleep. It can include playing sports. It can include, little picture shows relaxation exercises. Downloading a fitness app could be something that's helpful for somebody. They could be dancing. They could be taking a walk. So if that kind of person feels a need to move around, to utilize their body, to get themselves going, that they're usually going to be engaging in a physiological channel. So then the question really would be here is, do you find yourself getting energized by moving around and by taking care of your body? So I wanted to go in and talk about a few different scenarios that may be helpful in being able to visualize and understand more about how these coping channels regularly interact with us on a daily basis. So I'm going to just open up and ask to maybe we can, if anyone wants to engage in the chat, feel free. So the first scenario, let's talk about what would happen if you are in a situation where you're running errands, your car breaks down, and you're stuck now. You have all these errands. You had been starting to run. Maybe you even have a bunch of bags already in your car. Maybe you have a bunch of groceries. How would you handle that situation? So let's break it down for a minute. Let's say we're going and we're thinking about belief, right? You're that person who is a belief person. So you might be saying, I'm going to use that religious belief. You might even feel like you start praying and hoping and praying and saying, my car's got to get out of this situation. We got to get out, right? They might be using a ritual and saying, like, hey, I'm going to find meaning in this. This is going to be okay. They might be finding themselves using a mantra and saying, hey, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be fine. Or they might be saying to themselves, so the belief system might not be as positive. It might be like, oh God, like, I'm stuck, right? This person also might be like deciding that they're going to use affect, right? If the person who is normally the kind of person who wants to, use their emotions, Maybe they're the kind of person who's calling and texting other people and saying, like, I got to share what just happened. Like, oh my goodness. And it's not necessarily to to connect with other people, but, and maybe they're just sitting there and they're like, you know what? We're done. Like they're just sitting there, they're in their chair and they're like, I'm crying. They're crying at the wheel and they're like, whatever. Or they might be that person who's like, I'm just laughing. Like I don't even know what to say. Like it's just so ridiculous. It's of course it happened of all days. I don't even know what to do. If they're a social person, they might be finding that they're sitting there and they're like, yeah, I have to share this story, right? Like, you never believe what just happened to me. And they're calling a friend to share it, or they're posting on social media. They're taking a picture of their car and saying, like, hey, everybody, you have to commiserate with me and see what just happened. This crazy situation happened to me today. You never believe how my car just broke down in the middle of the street. We're on the busiest street in McCormick, and it literally just broke down. What about cognitive? So if a cognitive person is experiencing this, they may find themselves ready. Like we're going to start thinking of the action steps. We're preparing a checklist. What do we got to do when we get home, or like what do I need to do in order to fix this? It might even be that person who's like, okay, I'm going to jump out of the car and I'm going to try to fix this myself because I can figure it out. It's not a big deal. I'll figure it out. I'm going to get through this. I need to go and figure out the next step. And physiological, that person might be pacing around their car. They're like, I can't just sit here. I can't just sit in the car. There's nowhere that I'm going right now. I got to move. I got to get out, right? Maybe they're just like, okay, I'm just going to sit here and take a deep breath. Or maybe they're like, you know what? Forget it. I'm not even going to wait for my car to get fixed. I'm just going to walk home with those errands. I don't care if I have 20 bags. I need to get out of here. I need to move. So I'm curious, like, does anyone feel like they resonate with any of those in this kind of situation?
Well, I'll share immediately if you don't mind, while other people
Go
are
ahead.
thinking. For me, I think I resonate a bit with the belief part. Like although I'm not religious, I do think the universe is on our side. I like to think that. And so I think I would think what my grandmother might say, let this be for something else. So, like the idea that, you know what, maybe I'm supposed to slow down right now. Maybe this prevented me from getting into an accident, a little bit later, or, that everything has a ripple effect in my life. And so when things happen that aren't great on tiny scales and then also on large scales, I think what can I learn from it? What good came out of it? And that helps me a little bit.
Love that. Right. But it's Wendy, in your example, thank you so much for sharing. If anyone else wants to share, go ahead. I think that it just goes to show that that's not how you're going to handle that stressful situation, but that's also just how you go through life. In general, you're that positive person who's always going to say to somebody else, that's my mom. Like you're going to remind yourself of that mantra. So even when things are going badly, or it's a really hard, stressful day, you're going to be leaning on that, but you can lean on that even beforehand and think about how that might play a part in some of the regular everyday things that you're going through.
And someone else just chatted me directly that they think they're the cognitive level because they go right into the action plan of how they're going to fix it immediately.
Yeah, I find myself, I think, resonating most with the cognitive as well. I think I'm very realistic and I want to figure out what to do and how to fix it. And I like lists. So I think I find myself doing that a lot. It's not necessarily the best way or not way. Like that's just how people function. That's how they're wired, right? So let's go to the next example. And so you can see it a little bit more. So let's say your child got injured and they're playing in their soccer league and now done for the rest of the season because they gotta just sit out. So my first question is, do you think you have a sense of your child's coping challenge? Because it's probably going to look very different than yours. And if you do, how do you think your child would cope in that kind of situation? Right. So obviously this is based on age and some personality, right? But belief might look like, oh my gosh, it's going to be fine, mom. Don't worry about it. I'm going to be fine. And you're like a little worried about them, right? Or they're like, my life is ruined. I'm done. I can't even play for the rest of the season. What am I even going to do? I don't have anything that I'm going to be busy with now, and they're just a mess, right? Affect, maybe they're like, oh my gosh, I am going to just be crying for the next week. Or maybe they just, that how they're handling it. They're like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not talking about it with you. Maybe they're talking about it with other people, but like, mom, I'm not talking to you. Dad, I'm not having this conversation, right? Social might look like they're going to talk to their friends and they're going to just talk about it and they're just going to keep talking about it nonstop at home. You just, that's all they want to do is talk about how they can't play. Um, for imagination, maybe they're just using drawing and you find them curled up in their room and they're drawing, or maybe they're painting, or they're finding another outlet. Cognitive, maybe they're deciding what they're going to plan to do for the rest of the game or the rest of the practice because they just don't want to sit around. So they're going to think of ways in which they can engage themselves. And physiological, maybe they're like, okay, I'm going to find another way to get some exercise because they just don't, they love the exercise and they love their soccer league. And even though they can't play, they're going to figure out a way in which maybe they could find another thing to exercise or find a way to take care of their body. Don't know if that resonates with anyone. Feel free to share anything else. I'm going to go on to the next example. The next example is, let's say you're at work and the email system crashed and there's some really important deadlines approaching. What do you think your coping channel might look like? And then as opposed to your colleagues, right? So sometimes I think we get so frustrated because we see some other people responding in a way that doesn't look like ours. But we also have to remember that that is their way, that is their ingrained way in which they respond to different things. It does. And it also means that we can build upon it and learn from other people too, which is why we're talking about it today. So, some people might be finding like they're going to fall on that belief and they're going to say, everything's going to be fine, relax, right? And then someone else is like, don't you dare tell me to relax. Like, it's not going to be fine. The world is over because we have no email now, right? Affect might look like they're going to be, oh my gosh, we have so much work to do. It's insane. Or maybe they're just going to break down and start crying because they have these deadlines and they just don't know how to handle it, right? And they don't even care who's listening to them. They just need to get out their feelings and emotions. The
Mine
social
is very
person.
physical, Bracha. I would get a hive, a big, fat red hive on my forehead.
Oh my gosh. And what about social? The person who's social is probably like, woo, we're off the clock. Everybody, let's go out to eat, right? Or they're just like walking around, initiating conversation with everyone because they're like, hey, whatever, there's nothing we can do, right? And that might be also a bit of belief there. Imagination, you might find that person is brainstorming ways to figure out how to work without email, right? Like, okay, I'm going to be really creative here and like, we're just going to figure this out. And the cognitive person might be reassigning tasks to everyone, or like, oh yeah, you know what? Did anyone call IT? Well, I'm going to be calling IT. They're going to be that organized person there organizing everything. And the physiological person might be pacing or like, hey, I got to go have a snack. I need to go take care of myself right now. Or they're walking around the office. And I think it's so important that we're honoring everyone's feelings in this kind of situation, which is really stressful. And everyone's going to respond differently based on that situation. So now we come back to our graphic here. So now I think we have talked a little bit. When you think about this seesaw now, what are some things that you think you can do? What are some bricks you can add to that coping ability side that you can create more of that balance based on what we just discussed, right? And that might be different for every single person, or it might even be different situations, right? Based on the stressor that's happening. But if you're taking time, right, we're trying to be proactive. So we're taking time to figure out what you need for yourself, for your family, for your job, for your community, right? And you have to think about how practically, how would you start implementing some of those, which we're going to go and talk about in a moment. Um, so if anyone wants to put anything in the chat of what that coping ability, what you might fill in those bricks to create more of that balance.
Someone just sent me a direct message saying trying to be more cognitive rather than emotional, just trying to exercise that muscle, it sounds like.
Hmm, really interesting. I like that. What else do you think we can add? Anyone else? I mean, I'm happy to share. I just thought maybe someone else would want to say something other than me.
Well, I'll share mine.
Yeah, go ahead,
Is
Mindy.
that I do find that when even though I don't want to do it, I hate it during it and I hate it before it, exercising. But if I do it, I feel better with all the stressors of life for sure. And it has to be vigorous for me, where other people might need just a walk around the block. I need to be dripping.
That's exactly the point. Even if it isn't, even if physiological is not your natural gravitating, naturally gravitate toward the channel of physiological. If you find that it's helpful, maybe being able to build upon that and use that some more, right? And I think that's really it's very helpful for some people. I do think that sleep and food are definitely things that maybe are going to be helpful for people. And that goes into the physiological piece for sure. But I also like to think about that as somewhat more of a basic need than just like some extra things that we're doing for ourselves. So if you're feeling that those needs are not met, you might want to start there. All right. So the last piece before we end today is I really want people to take a moment to kind of think about, and this is why I asked you if you could have a piece of paper and a pen in front of you. If you do not have that, then that's fine. You could just kind of fill it out in your mind. Let's take a few moments, right? We talked about being proactive. And so there's going to be some times where it's going to be hard to do this, but if we're taking a moment to do it when we're not so extremely overwhelmed, then it might be easier. So let's think for a moment about what channel or channels might resonate with you. And then I want you to take a moment to lean into this and think about how you can practically do that, right? How can you lean more into that channel? Okay. So, for example, let's say, Wendy, I'm going to take your example. So, you said physiologically, you know that that channel is really helpful. It doesn't mean you do it or you go to it all the time, but it's helpful for you, right? So then thinking about physiological, right? And how can you lean into this by doing maybe some exercise, or maybe there's something else that you need in order to practice more of the physiological channel. And then you're saying that, let's say we're taking exercise as that example, right? You go to number 3. What can you practically do to make this happen in your life, right? Because we all know we get stuck. We say, hey, this is helpful. We're going to do this. It's great. And in reality, it doesn't happen. So how do we make it have, how do we make it so it's really practical? So think for a moment, what do you need to do? Do you need to put a timer on your phone? Do you need to go get that exercise mat? Do you need to put on some music and get yourself energized? Do you need to go buy that, whatever it is, those exercise clothes or whatever to get yourself invigorated? Do you need to buy that water bottle for yourself that you're like, oh, yeah, that's going to help me because I'm going to go take a walk with that? Practical things, just baby little steps. What is it that you need to make this happen? And then number 4, which I think we don't think about all the time, is what can we do? Who can give us support, right? What kind of supports do we need? Do we need our husband to take the kids for 5 minutes so that we could, we could do that exercise if we decide we're doing it for 5 minutes? Do we need to schedule that time and we need somebody to call us at that scheduled time and say, hey, are you doing that exercise? Right? Do we need that walking partner to go along with us and say, hey, we're going to do that walk or we're going to do that run together? Who is it that around you can make that happen, can keep you accountable, can help you, support you, and lift you up? So if anyone wants to take a moment to fill this out, I highly recommend doing this because this is the great time to sit down and do it. You're here anyway. If you're taking care of a lot of other things too, which I totally understand, it would be very helpful if you just stop for a moment, thought about it, because it will help you down the line. As we talked about before, being proactive, and this is one way to do that. And before we leave today, I just want to leave you with some really great strategies. This is actually taken by Very Well Mind. And in this really great article, it actually talks a lot about different ways in which we could go through. And the piece that I just shared prior to this slide is a piece of that. So it's really helpful to think about how you can take care of yourself. But if you're not going to go through all the steps to do it, it's really hard to figure out what exactly do you need. So it's really helpful, number one, to start with assessing your needs. So make a list of the different parts of your life and all the major activities that maybe you're engaging with every day, whether it's work, whether it's school, different relationships, families, right? Those are some just ideas of who to list. And then go to considering your stressors, because not all those activities are going to be stressful, or maybe it depends on the day, right? Think about those aspects and the areas of your life that cause the stress, and then think about ways in which you might address that stress. And moving on to devising some self-care strategies, right? We talked about some actual activities that will help you and make you feel better in each of these areas, right? So if someone says, the relationships in my life are really extremely stressful, and I find that I'm not being able to connect with people in the way that I want, it's really stressful. And so maybe finding a way to develop a boundary in engaging those. Or maybe maybe you're a social person and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to find a strategy that normally works for me, and I'm going to use that strategy of connecting and building those healthy social relationships. And maybe we can do some fun outing that won't be so stressful and will be a way to nurture the relationships. Or maybe you're just plain stressed at work. And so you're like, what is it that I could do to help myself? Right. So if that's a stressful work day, maybe thinking about, do you need to take a break in the middle of your day? I remember I used to have a really big problem actually taking my lunch. And so at one of my last jobs, my supervisor said to me, she said, if you're not going to take your lunch, that's fine, but invite me to that time, put it on your calendar and invite me. And so I always think about that because she held me accountable in that kind of situation, didn't allow me to really just have an out, because even though she wouldn't be calling and checking on me every time, sometimes we would talk and she'd be like, did you take that lunch? Right. And I have to admit to her, no, I didn't. But even seeing it on the calendar and it would ding and I'd be like, oh, and I would push it away and I maybe didn't do that. And it didn't take that time to take my lunch. But maybe that's a way in which it was helpful to have somebody accountable for me. And so I also want to think about planning for challenges, because there are going to be challenges. It's not going to happen the way we want it to happen. And we know that there's certain areas, it's not going to work perfect. And so plan for that. Plan for the challenges that are going to come up so that it doesn't feel as stressful. You're like, okay, well, realistically for this next week, I'm not going to be doing that exercise. It might take me 5 weeks to even get started, right? Or maybe you can think about some small steps to take. Okay, for tomorrow, I'm going to start with only 5 minutes. I'm going to literally schedule 5 minutes in my day. Because if you start thinking, I'm going to exercise every day for the next hour, that is so not realistic. And that might not work with your regular schedule and your day. And it might even cause you more stress. So the way that it has to work is, again, thinking about those channels in regular ways that are working for you, and thinking about how those things could be built in regularly as part of your day, because those are things that you might be naturally gravitating to and engaging in. And the last thing is to schedule time to focus on your needs. So again, if this is the time that you choose to do that, great. If you do not, then find some other time to do that. To even though you might feel like there's no more time in your day to possibly squeeze any other thing. I'm not even saying you should spend more than 5 minutes, but even just thinking, I'm going to think about myself and what I need in this situation and how I can possibly engage in other channels and coping strategies for myself. Even if you don't do them, you're at least thinking and taking a moment for yourself, which is, I know so much of what we do at JCFS and what we do, Wendy, the amazing work at No Shame on You does is that we just want to make sure that it's a priority because mental health is health, right? And so I wanted to leave this off. Wendy, maybe you can read this instead of having my voice.
Absolutely. Here we go. Food rewires the brain. Music rewires the brain. Travel rewires the brain. Sunlight rewires the brain. Reading rewires the brain. Learning rewires the brain. Laughter rewires the brain. Gratitude rewires the brain. Movement rewires the brain. Meditation rewires the brain. Breath work rewires the brain. Community rewires the brain. Quality sleep rewires the brain. Time in nature rewires the brain. Positive thought rewires the brain. And I love this last one. Acts of kindness rewire the brain. It's
Thank you.
beautiful.
So as you can see, like there's so many different ways that we can do different things to help us, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. And so I hope that today you've taken some thought and now that you've identified some natural channels, it's really important to think about how we can put this into daily practice. So, think about, do you have more awareness of what you need to internally bolster yourself? If you don't, go back and think about that. How can you build that as a routine to actually actively build resilience? What supports might you need in order to be doing that? Great. Maybe it's at your workplace, maybe it's out in the community, whatever it is to make those coping strategies stick long term. And hopefully you can have a better understanding of how to better support other people around you in their way of coping. So,
Bracha, thank you so much. I was going to say, how can we get in touch with you if we want to learn more? And here you have it.
yes,
Um,
absolutely. And Wendy, you are more than welcome to put my email in the chat. I guess should I stop sharing?
yeah,
And then if
go.
anyone has any specific questions.
Yes. So I have two questions that came in. One is this something people can practice as a therapy intervention, or is this just a general concept?
So, I mean, I'm sure people could do it in therapy, but yeah, I mean, it's a general concept. And what I love about it is that anybody can do it in any way. And it doesn't have to be something that's so structured either. The way I maybe described it today showed a little more structure to it. But as you can see, some of these things are just about recognizing what we're already using and how we're regularly approaching life.
Thank you. And the second question is, I feel that I lean in too strong on the affect branch, and I think it's a detriment. I'd like to work on exercising other branches. Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great that you at least identified and recognized that that's something that could be detrimental to you. Again, it also doesn't mean that you have to, completely change your regular way of approaching things. If you find that affect is your regular way, it doesn't mean that you have to stop. It just might mean that finding some ways that are actually helping you and leaving you feeling restored and invigorated. So that's different activities that you can do in ways that actually are able to help you feel a little bit better. So depending on the situation, if you're feeling super emotional about a situation, it could also be helpful to think about ways in which you can express that emotion in a healthier way And that will look really different for each person. Another thing too that I think is helpful is trying to lean a little bit more into cognitive, because those can play really well together. And it might be really not natural for somebody to do that. So I don't want to suggest that somebody does that. And I don't know their situation. I don't want to suggest somebody does that. And if it's not going to be helpful to them. But sometimes being able to think, okay, realistically, what can I do in this moment, in this time? In starting to maybe like sit down and make a list, or, doing something else to distract them from that emotion, depending on the situation, may or may not be helpful. And again, sometimes people need to get out their feelings and emotions. So I don't want to tell people to just ignore those feelings and emotions. I think it's important to acknowledge it, and then maybe moving on to an action item after that, so that somebody could pretty much feel that they've been validated, and get out there and express that emotion in a healthy way, but then also be able to move on past that.
That's awesome. And I just think it's great to be aware. One thing that I'm reflecting on, it's great to be aware of your pH and how you operate, and to be aware and kind of notice maybe how your colleagues or your family members and the people that mean a lot to you in your lives, what their basic pH is. And sometimes maybe I'm thinking about it in my own relationships, that maybe understanding where people are coming from helps me to give a little bit of grace, and know how we're different and how we might react to things differently. So I think it's a really interesting model. How long has the model been around? Is it a new thing?
I don't think it's that new. I believe that Dr. Muli Lahad had developed it. Um, I want to say it's probably within the last 20 years. I don't have that exact data, so don't quote me on that. Um, he has been developing this model for quite a while, and it's used more like widely, probably in like more Israel areas. And it's part of a larger work that he has done in coping and resiliency. So you can always look him up and check him out, because he has his own center in Israel, and he does lots of different trainings on this. He uses a lot of imagination and play. He does a whole training on imagination and play, which he actually did for Nefesh Chicago not too long ago.
Well, awesome. I think that can concludes um, our questions. And I just want to thank you, Bracha, so much for your expertise and your partnership on so many things. No Shame on You really loves working with you and JCFS Chicago, and are grateful for the relationship. In the chat, I put just a short survey. It takes about a second or two to fill out, really less than 10 seconds. So if you have a moment, it helps us make sure that we're hitting the mark and report back to our generous funders. And then finally, I just wanted to share with anyone who's local here to Chicago, we have a really cool program coming up on Sunday. It's in partnership with the city of Evanston and the Levy Center, a program about resilience and mental illness, a conversation with an incredible man. He's a retired two-star major general, who reported to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and supervised thousands of troops in his career. And he is speaking to us about his journey with bipolar disorder, how it affected him, how the diagnosis was missed, and just he's on the mission to eliminate stigma just like us. And then prior to the program on Sunday at 6:15, we have a mental health activity fair hosted by our amazing teen leadership board, including different activities and also featuring a rock band. So come on out. It's a true intergenerational event. If you go to our website, www.noshameonyou.org, that's the letter U, not YOU, you can see it right on the front page. And that concludes our Feature Mind, and we'll be back in September, so look out for our schedule. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Bracha.
Thank you so much for hosting me. Take care, everyone.
Bye.